What is something about yourself that sounds totally made up but is 100% real? I was the best man on both sides of a lesbian wedding because I had dated both the bride and the bride, stayed close friends and introduced them to each other after our breakups. I was at a store when Tony Hawk was signing autographs. I was only 10 at the time and was a huge fan. One of his early video games had just come out. The store had a couple TVs on the wall and some video games to play. Being a kid, I waited for one controller to open up and someone leave. A kid ended up leaving and I grabbed the controller and started playing and minding my own business. A couple minutes later, the store wanted to grab photos of Tony playing his own video game. He came over and grabbed the second controller and began to play multiplayer with me. Probably played for 10 minutes. The bonus was it was also my 10th birthday. So I played Tony Hawk Pro Skater with Tony Hawk. Edit. Wow, I made this comment and didn't return to Reddit until just now. Was not expecting it to be that big of a hit. Thank you. I do not have photos of myself playing the game with him, but I believe my parents have a couple of photos of me with him and getting his autograph. I still have the signed board on my wall. I've published 4 peer-reviewed scientific papers on hamster testicles. Edit. Holy shit. I never thought I would write this, but rip my inbox. I'm currently working on a critical COVID-related project which doesn't involve testicles and thus would be much less exciting for Redditing purposes. A pelican engulfed my head with its massive fucking beak when I was a small child. Pelicans are cunts. Pelicunts. I won 2 TV game shows. The $10,000 Pyramid, won $10,300, in 1975, and Sale of the Century, was on the show for 9 days. Won $34,000 in cash and prizes, in 85. Nice. I've never won anything in my life. I got ran over by a car, but the driver didn't see me and proceeded to back over me. Edit. Thanks for all the kind words. I'm shocked at the amount of people who said that this happened to them or someone they knew as well. The world really is a weird place. And for all who are asking, my legs are perfectly fine now. On a side note, I actually really enjoy running, it's one of my favorite things to do. No, I'm not from China nor have I ever lived there, I'm American. I don't quite understand why people are asking this. Edit. Number 2. A couple Redditors have pointed out to me that it's because killing someone in China is apparently less expensive, which is a horrifying thought, but thanks for the explanations. Edit. Number 3. How is my mental health? Was I traumatized? Well, it very fucking terrifying at the time and I was definitely scared of cars afterwards. But if you're asking if I'm feeling any trauma to this day, then I would say not very much if at all. Thanks for asking though. I ran out of gas outside of La Paz, Bolivia. Luckily it was downhill for about 6 kilometers into the city. I coasted the whole way on my motorbike, past buses and drifted into a gas station. Never missed a beat. At age 50-odd and with limited to no video game experience, my mother completed Mario 64 before I did, in about half the time it finally took me to do it. Get good, sweetie. When I was a kid, I woke up to find my cat giving birth to her kittens on my pillow, 1 inch from my face. I took it as a compliment. It totally is. That's like the Cat Congressional Medal of Honor. I've had a headache since August 2015 and I will probably have it for the rest of my life. It's only on half my head, so I got that going for me, which is nice. Link. I am related to William Henry Harrison, the president who died from hypothermia because he wouldn't wear a jacket. My great-grandfather and his son both died from hypothermia as well, but under slightly different experiences. I have almost died from eating way too many vitamins, jumping into a ceiling fan, and jumping from a cliff. My dad almost lit a gas station on fire. Basically, we are a very dumb bloodline starting from William Henry Harrison. I was once sponsored by the Crunk Energy Drink Company for sailing. I imagine I was the only sailor on their list. I literally just emailed them saying that I sailed and asked if they wanted me to put stickers on my boat. They sent me a few cases of the drink, t-shirts, hats, the works. My car was known as the Crunk Mobile. When my mom was in grad school, she took several labs where she worked with cadavers. Because my dad worked nights, she often had to take me to class with her, and she'd usually just plonk me down on the table with the cadaver while she worked on it. Can I go to work with you? Over my dead body. I bought a guitar amp from Brad Whitford, of Aerosmith, when I was 17. He and Steven Tyler served up cheeseburgers for me and my friends. Edit. As requested. So, Brad's son was a punk and I knew him from the scene. I was in a band that had some small local marginal success. This is 97/98 in Boston. I needed a new amp for our first US tour but had very little money. I was getting drunk with his son and, on a whim, I asked him if his dad had any amps laying around that he didn't need. We laughed and carried on partying. The next day, I get a call at my home. It was Mr. Whitford himself. He was super nice but to the point. My son says you got a band and need a good rig for your Les Paul. I have something in mind for you. Just gotta have my guy get it from the warehouse. Come by my house in Norwell this weekend and check it out. That was the gist of the call. Obviously, the whole band came with me. And our roadie. We get to his house and it's totally him. So weird. These guys were like gods in Boston. I wasn't the hugest fan but knew him from his work with Wayne's World. He takes me to one of his garages where there is this cool full stack. The brand is Bedrock. An old company from New Hampshire that made good quality amps in the 80s. This one was custom made for Brad. Basically Marshall components. 4 tubes. All the knobs go to 11. Not kidding. Still has the property of Aerosmith stickers on it. He plugs it in and rips a crazy solo on his Les Paul and then hands it to me and I play a couple power chords. He asks for $300 for the whole thing. I pay him and he tells his son to give us a tour of the house. This is where shit gets nuts. It's just like you expect. Tons of gold records, platinum records. Pictures of him with people like John Lennon, Robert De Niro and Joey Ramone. Then we get to see his studio and the largest collection of Marshall amps in the world. Seriously, like 200 cabs. A wall of guitars. Guitars so pretty and amps so cool, it made sense for him to find the one he sold me dispensable. After the house tour, he told us to meet him at the little bar and grill they own in town. When we get there early and he arrives 30 minutes later with motherfucking Steven Tyler in tow. You guys the punk group? He was so nice. They went in the back and came out with burgers for us all on the house. Then they straight up left. Irish goodbye, even. I still have the amp. I used it on the road for almost 10 years in 5 bands. Now, it's just a conversation piece. But it still works. I'll crank her up every now and then. Edit 2. Pics. Link. I can't look left. Seriously. I'm not an ambi looker, it's like the Zoolander of birth defects. It's called Duane's syndrome and my left eye can't turn left, so if I try to look to my left I see double. Growing up my parents raised me to believe it was a party trick and not a disability, so I would always show it off to friends, which in retrospect I think was pretty sweet. Edit. My mom discovered that something was off when I was a baby and she was doing the airplane motion with the spoon of baby food to the left. My left eye was not cooperating. Lol. Edit 2. Fun fact: now that I'm in my 30s I can see in photos that there is a bag under my right eye but not under my left eye. Presumably because I use my right eye far more often. Edit 3. I am so excited to see there are so many fellow Redditors with Duane's and I'm not alone. I've never met anyone else who had it, so it's really nice to hear from people who know what it's like. Edit 4. A lot of you have asked about driving. It didn't impact me mainly because my mom taught me how to use my mirrors first. By turning my head before even letting me turn the car on for the first time. She walked around the car and we tried to identify my limitations. I also have a blind spot detector on my car now, which is super helpful. I try not to totally depend on it though. Edit 5. Here's a photo. I saw the former Prime Minister of Poland in his underwear. Husband and I fell in love at first sight. Moved in together after 2 days. Married 5 months later. Still married. It will be 40 years in May. I am one of very few people outside WW1 to live through mustard gas. So rare the doctors, 1995, no internet, had no idea how to treat me. Pure child stupidity. I grew up in a sparsely populated High Sierra community with lots of empty vacation homes. One of these homes was under construction about a block. There were no blocks in reality, just long windy roads cutting through the forest. and the construction crew would just leave the half-finished house open between shifts because no one lives here anyway. Me, a retard. Me and a friend decided to stumble into the home and fuck around with Rondo stuff. I saw a large vat used for mixing liquids, and poured an entire bucket of industrial cleaning liquid into it. I went and got another large bucket full of chems. Don't mix Rondo industrial chems, children, and dumped that in there too. Huge yellow gas explosion in my face. I got about 15 feet away before collapsing and beginning to retch yellow goo and vomit everywhere. No breathing now, just gasping and vomiting goop. My friend ran to get my mom, she called ambulance, they put me in a helicopter and sent me to UC Davis Medical Center. My doctor eventually made contact with someone who knew how to treat my case through the internet. I had never heard of it. 2 weeks in the ICU, almost died, and my lungs are still fucking trash. I am 34 now. I got hernia by sneezing too hard. I got mine trying to match my wife's pregnant belly. Pop. I cannot see 3D effects in movies or games. I didn't know that until a friend showed me his new Nintendo 3DS and I asked him whether this thing was a scam because it didn't look any different to me than a normal DS. We had a fight over this because we both thought the other one was bullshitting him. You're holding it wrong. How the fuck do you not see this? Are you fucking kidding me right now? There's nothing 3D about this thing. One of my ancestors was dumb and bought one of Napoleon's doorknobs. It turns out it's fake. Doorknobs were invented after Napoleon died. Once in college I applied for a job at the library help desk. I figured I would help people find books. Didn't give it much more thought than that. During the interview, I aced all of the customer service questions. Then they asked me whether I knew how to defrag a hard drive. Cue alarm bells in my head, but I kept calm outwardly and said no, but you can teach me. I worked in IT for 3 years by accident. They were too nice to fire me. My great-great-grandfather was a Pinkerton detective, acted on vaudeville, and had 5 wives in 2 different states that knew nothing of each other. He also slightly changed his last name each time and never got caught until Ancestry website happened lol. I've been stabbed 8 times edit. This is a fairly new account so I'm prepared to identify myself link edit. I didn't get the chance to tell my story in court as they pled guilty before I was called. I was drunk and I came out the pub I was in to get some fresh air. I walked past 3 guys and one of them asked me for a cigarette. I told him I don't smoke and he became immediately aggressive. I argued with him for a while and his friends started shouting at me and threatening me. At this point he kind of disappeared behind me. One of the others showed me a knife so I turned and walked away. I knew they were following me as was walking back to the pub. I had a bus stop on my left-hand side and a building on my right. I looked up and saw the first guy walking towards me. It was fight or flight and I had nowhere to fly to so I decided that attack was the best form of defense. I think I managed 1 punch before the 3 of them jumped me. They had been robbing and beating up people all over town for about 2 weeks beforehand. Please tell me it has nothing to do with your username. Kids, am I right? I once successfully ran an unfunded shelter for approximately 100 homeless veterans, as a homeless civilian. I lost my job and housing in early 2017. I'd been homeless before and slept rough on the streets, although that was in California where the weather was at least bearable. This time I was living in North Dakota, and I'd seen what the winters were like. I figured if I was going to have to sleep on the streets again, I'd better move somewhere where I didn't have to contend with hypothermia for a good part of the year, so used the last of my money to relocate to Arizona. I had a totally impractical plan of finding work, and then housing within a few weeks before my remaining funds ran out, but the deadline came and went and I found myself on the streets again. A homeless advocate I'd reached out to tried to get me sheltered at a place for homeless veterans, but being a civilian, they turned me away. Aforementioned advocate reached an accommodation with the veterans by setting up an overnight shelter for homeless civilians next door that I would run for him. In exchange, I would be allowed to sleep on their property, outside the walls, use their facilities like showers and bathrooms, and join in their communal meals if they had enough food. Because the civilian shelter was an overnight thing, I really didn't have much to do, or anywhere to go, in the day, so I spent more and more time with the vets. I took it on myself to help them with odd jobs like security, packing lunches for the local homeless, who couldn't live with them, to come and get unloading donations from concerned citizens, and security, firewatch, while the camp slept at night. I soon became the camp's unofficial official cook, which was awesome, because I love cooking and it was a challenge cooking meals for so many people so quickly, using an outdoor kitchen with bare-bones facilities. I gradually began to take on more responsibilities with the vets, and the overnight shelter was more like a side gig. The vets repeatedly asked me to move into the walls and stay with them, making me full-time, but I refused at first because I felt like it would be letting down the guy who I was running the overnight shelter for. I woke up one day to see the vets dismantling the tent we used for the overnight shelter, and one of them wryly asked me, "Where are you going to stay now?" I moved in with the guys later that day. A couple of months later, the incumbent base commander and his family had secured housing for themselves, and he didn't ask as much as tell me I would be taking over for them. They had thought about who was going to take on the job after they left and decided I was apparently the only one fit for the role, due to my diligence and enthusiasm for helping my newfound friends. NGL, there were parts of it that were tough, and really grated. I felt like I had to constantly prove myself to the big dick swinging mentality veterans, who felt that, as a veterans camp, it should have been run by a vet. I was also just as homeless as my men. We had nothing but tent fabric to protect us from the elements, sometimes little food or water, and constant issues with the local tweakers and criminal elements of the homeless. But helping these people get off the streets and or reunited with their families is hands down one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done in life. I took my mother for a surprise trip to NYC. She got married to my father there in '68. The surprise was manufactured by way of telling her we were going to Australia. We live in New Zealand, so a trip to Australia is not a huge deal. It's the type of thing you could do for the weekend, and therefore she packed a bag and brought her passport. We got to the airport and said, "Surprise! We're going to New York," and she cried her eyes out with delight. When we arrived, on our first morning, I said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" She said, "When I was last here in 1968, the Twin Towers weren't complete, so I'd like to go to the top of them. Your wish is my command." I said, and off we went to the WTC. That was the afternoon of September 10, 2001. Suffice it to say, there was a particular poignancy when we looked out the window at around 8 a.m. the next morning. I've been in 3 fatal train accidents. Never had a scratch. Found the star of Unbreakable. I had my tongue surgically enhanced for more reach and flexibility when I was 8. Edit. I'm super jazzed by how many of us are out there. I cannot taste any salt whatsoever. Edit. For people asking, it's a brain thing, food tastes bland, salted chips taste plain, and I've not had any British food. Edit 2. I can still taste other spices and herbs. No idk what cum tastes like. Sorry to put you on blast, dude, but that's weird. Salt water just tastes bad. MSG and other sodium-based things just make me gag. Getting on Xbox, Overwatch, etc. doesn't help, but I can smell the salt. I was baptized by a serial killer. Arrested and spent 3 days in a holding cell for a crime that I didn't commit. About a year after the whole matter was done and dusted with. Mind you, I say didn't commit the crime. But I was involved in the story from start to finish. My wife, then girlfriend, and I eloped. We crossed over 3 states in India over a 5-day period to get married. My father-in-law, then mortal nemesis, is a well-connected man. He got in touch with his contacts in the police department to try and get a hold of us and filed a formal complaint as part of due process. Long story short, we got married. The rather inept police couldn't find a couple of 21-year-olds. Over the next 4 months, all of it was sorted out. First, we were vilified. Then the parents were mollified, etc., etc. But in the beautiful ending to that story, my father-in-law forgot to retract his complaint. Proceed to our first wedding anniversary, and we were taking a flight out of the country for a celebratory vacation. From Bombay Airport, India to Dubai Airport, the United Arab Emirates. I was flagged at immigration and was taken across to a cell where I was duly arrested. My crime? Kidnapping. I was being accused of having kidnapped the lady I was now married to. Taken to a cell. Whilst my wife tried to explain the misunderstanding. One cunt of a cop told her, "Madam, don't worry. We know how Stockholm Syndrome works, you are safe now," etc. And this was on a Friday evening. Due judicial process was followed and I was released by the judge on the following Monday. Tears of joy, hell of a story to share with people when we include all the details of the planning and execution. Edit. We marked our 10th anniversary on the 12th of this month and the 9th anniversary of me getting my ass hauled to jail. My grandfather went AWOL on the French Foreign Legion and was banned from ever going back to France. All because he left to marry my grandmother. Edit. Oh god, this blew up. Reddit YouTubers, please don't feature this comment. My family ancestry can be traced back to a court jester who served in the court of King Jakob IV of Sweden. Whenever someone calls you a fool, you're just carrying on the legacy. My grandfather got an award from Mussolini in 1935. He was just born with 6.3 kilograms, 13 lbs 14.2 Oz, and was awarded the award of Italy's biggest baby. Edit. Wow, I didn't expected it to blow this way. Thanks for the silver, UXX sandwich. Also, since some people asked, my great-grandma also worked as a cleaning lady one day before he was born. He was born December 24th, and she worked until December 23rd of that year. And if you think my grandpa was big, recently a baby was born in India with 6.7 kilograms, 14.77 pounds, and the world record was for another Italian baby, born in 1955 with flippin' 10.2 kilograms. 22 pounds 8 ounces. I beat anorexia. I'm a guy and I do not have photos of me from that time, due to shame, so I have no proof. I have gone from 70 pounds to approximately 130 pounds. I was shooting some stuff in my village and a bullet ricocheted and hit me in the torso. I was afraid my parents would kill me if they found out. I was young. So I used a knife and tweezers to remove the fragment and a stapler to stitch it up and then covered the wound, and they never found out until a few years later when I told them. I once won a $500 raffle during a routine visit to my local tea shop. It was the building's annual Black Friday event and there were 5 baskets with varying amounts of goods, services, and coupons. I needed tea, so my only stop was the tea shop. It cost me $20 to fill my tins, but they said raffle tickets were given out after a $25 purchase. I said, fuck it, and got a hot tea for me and the woman in line behind me. Entered with that one ticket. I got a call a few days later saying I won the top prize basket. When I went to claim, they asked about my purchases. I told them and they said the drawings had over 1,000 tickets and many people had over a dozen entries. The raffle prize included $25 to the tea shop. I was born 12 weeks early, and was nearly born earlier. My mom had a weak uterus from endo, so they had to push me back and stitch her up. The doctors told my parents to expect me to be unable to breathe, walk, etc. on my own. The doctor performing the C-section nearly dropped in surprise and how hard I was screaming and flailing. I do have a few health problems, but it could have been much worse. Editing. Since others are mentioning their experiences and health issues. I had hydrocephalus, it was treated poorly. The doctor thought I was fine, and my parents were overreacting when I was seizing and turning colors. It was treated, and now had approximately 6 ft of tubing in the form of a shunt, as well as seizures I'll never outgrow. They're treated with medication. Otherwise, outside asthma and other smaller things, I live a normal life. I graduated high school a few years ago, and hope to be married soon. Edit 2. Thank you everyone for your stories. TBH, I'm a bit overwhelmed. I didn't expect my comment to blow up like this. I'm going to do my best to respond to everyone, but I apologize in advance if I don't. I promise I'm reading every comment, and they all mean so much. I lost my heel in a lawnmower accident. Edit. Here's the story. I was 4 at the time and I won't say who exactly did it. But he was mowing and it was a riding mower and the hitch on the back where you can hook a little trailer. I love to stand on that part and ride. Well, this time I saw a frog in the grass and being the 4-year-old I was at the time, I jumped off the mower and onto the grass and put my hands over the frog to catch it, and he didn't realize I had jumped off and he backed up. JFC. That sounds very unpleasant. What happened exactly? No offense, but I think he just earned your username, lol. I have won an actual WWE match. Spent a really cool day in London with Christian Slater and his mum. His mum is adorable. I found out my father wasn't my biological father in 10th grade biology class. We were learning about blood types and traits. I raised my hand thinking I was a smart ass. Your chart isn't accurate. My dad has a B negative and I'm O positive. My teacher said I think your mom has some explaining to do. And we all chuckled. Turned out, he was not my father. I have phytophotodermatitis, which is a big fancy word for I can't get acidic juices, lemons, limes, apples, oranges, etc., on my skin and go out in the sun. Turns my skin brown like a rash. Doesn't hurt or itch, just discoloration. Happened 3 or 4 times in my life. I lost my virginity before my first kiss. My uncle wasn't a kisser either. My dad kidnapped me and took me to Singapore for very malicious purposes, I'm sure you could imagine. I was 15 and my dad literally had fake documents and suitcases filled with random clothes. When we got there we went to a sketchy hotel and after 15 minutes he went to the bar. A bit after that, some guy just walks in. I was confused but he began muttering saying I was too pale, and too old, and he left. I called my dad but he didn't answer so I climbed out through the window and went to the police. They put me on a plane home that same hour. I don't really tell people because it's a bit of a crazy story and sounds made up. Hence why it's here, but yay. I was almost named Storm because I was born at 3 am in the middle of a massive tornado storm. One touched down actually a few minutes after I was born. I was also essentially dead. Docs thought they were going to lose both me and my mom. But somehow I lived bitches. I've literally never been sick, or at least never showed symptoms of being sick. No colds, no fevers, no viruses, no flu even. I really don't know what it's like to be sick or get sick, and frankly, I hope I never do. It'd sure be ironic if the first time I got sick was now. Edit. I'm 30 years old by the way, that was probably worth mentioning. I am blind. Many online commenters think that I am lying. If I want to lie, I would rather tell everyone that I am a rich traveler. There's a scientist who died on the same day I was born and her research subject was very, very close to mine. Not just the field but down to some articles she wrote and some of her side interests. Some tidbits of her personal life also echo some of mine. I only found out after I graduated and now I low-key feel like reincarnation might be a thing. ETA I don't really believe reincarnation is a thing. That was a joke. Jesus, people. Welcome back. A horse threw me in the air when I was a child. But I wasn't on his back. He grabbed the skin of my back with his teeth and yeeted me. I never graduated high school but I have a bachelor's degree. I was homeschooled and my mom never went through the legal steps to actually get me a real diploma, so she made one in Photoshop that was then used to get me into this podunk community college that didn't verify it. From there I got my associate's degree, which I then used to get into a decent university where I got my bachelor's. I can smell some illnesses and chronic symptoms. My sense of smell is normally pretty average, but I can sometimes smell if a person is sick before they start showing symptoms, and have been able to identify, predict 2 seizures, a diabetic blood sugar drop, and multiple chronic migraines before they happened. Are you a service dog? My ex and I were having a huge argument in a hotel parking lot. My friend and ex's dad were there as witnesses. 2 big buses pulled up and Justin Bieber got off one of them with a security guard and walked right past us. I was crying and my ex was yelling at me and JB said, and I quote, "Hey, stop that." My ex yelled back at him, "White PPL shouldn't have dreads." And Justin just got onto the other bus his guard. My friend was cracking up saying, "Was that Justin Bieber?" And sure enough, some people in his entourage or whatever were staying at that hotel and he was in town that night for a concert. TLDR. Justin Bieber told my ex to stop yelling at me, and then my ex yelled at him. My great-grandfather worked in the textile business and started importing rayon fabric from Japan in the late 60s and 70s. Keep in mind this was during the early days of synthetic fabrics and traveling to Japan was not all that common. On a business trip, he met some Japanese businessmen who were selling newly designed transistor radios. His contacts wanted to set up an exclusive import agreement for their electronics to North America. But my great-grandfather declined, because how many of these radios could you possibly sell? Turns out that was a short-sighted business decision, because that company was called Sony Electronics. He turned down the exclusive import contract for Sony. On the other side of my family, My Canadian relatives walked away from 100 acres of land in Alberta during the Dust Bowl and Great Depression. They decided it was not worth paying the taxes on their land. Turns out that land was right in the heart of the Alberta oil deposits. Also on my mother's side of the family, they used to have a citrus orchard near Los Angeles. They sold it cheap to some land developers. That farm was right at Hollywood and Vine. My family on both sides is bad at seeing long-term investments. Sue. Dump any stocks recently? I once drove a locomotive backwards through the Canadian Rockies. I completed GTA San Andreas in 3 days. I never slept, eat nor shit. Are these two separate facts?